There we go. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another Receivables info webinar. Today, I'm here with some good friends, and we're going to talk a little bit about websites and how to collect more payments through them as a law firm. And so, luckily enough, today I have Mr. Brad Counsel with Slovin Associates. I have Jeff Albert with Markoff Law, and I have Lance with HealPay. How you guys doing today?
Awesome.
Good.
Great.
Awesome.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate you guys joining me today. I think we've got a lot of information to cover in a short period of time. But I always like to kick these off by giving our audience some perspective on, kind of where you're coming from, right? So, Brad, maybe we could start it off with you, and you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today.
Yeah, sure. My name is Brad Counsel. I'm one of the partners here at Slovin and Associates. We are a collection and creditors' rights law firm in Cincinnati, Ohio, covering the tri-state area of Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. Been here with the firm since right out of law school, so going on 18 years now. Started from the bottom and just working my way up. It's been a good experience. Great place to work.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you've gained quite a bit of experience through that time period, especially as you've gone through kind of rolling out websites, payment portals, right? There's been a lot of technology changes over those last 18 years. So I want to come back to that. We're going to dig into that today. Jeff, on your side, could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you get to the seat that you're in today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the industry since 1994. Started as an associate for a practice that was rooted, I think, in the late 50s. I ended up taking over that practice in the late 96. Ran my own practice, did debt buying. In fact, started that in the early 2000s. That's where we met back in the Credit Max days.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably mid 2000s, something like that. So,
2006,
anyways,
2007. Yeah.
ultimately, my practice merged with Markoff Law back in 2011, and here we are at present. We are Markoff Law. I'm a managing partner there, along with my partner Steve Markoff, and we cover 5 states. So headquarters Chicago, of course, cover Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Wisconsin.
Excellent. Well, I hope to see you
Yeah,
up there in a couple of weeks on my next trip through Chicago.
I hope to be down where you are in Florida.
Yeah, come on, come on. I don't know if now's the time to come in. It's only about 65 degrees here today, so
Better
it's
than
not
Michigan.
yeah, fair statement. So Lance, I think this is our first time doing a broadcast together. Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure, yeah. I started a company with my business partner called HealPay. Previously, I was a programmer and consultant for various industries and collections. I just kind of hopped in and it was such an interesting industry to me I dove in and started building products for a collection agency.
Mhm.
And the first product that we created was a payment portal. And this was, I feel like it's at least 13 years, 15 years ago, maybe we started this. And so, ever since then, we started with just the payment portal, but with a unique twist where consumers could use what are called treatments,
Mhm.
and they'd be presented with payment offers depending on the situation. So they could get like a 24, 18, 12-month payment plan, or they could settle. Ours was the first payment portal really in the industry that was malleable and configurable in that way. Um, and it's mobile friendly. So we were one of the first payment portals to be mobile friendly at a time when people were really wanting to pay with their phones. I mean,
Sure.
you know, 15 years ago seems like a long time, but people were using technology to make payments, and they really needed a way to just settle online. So yeah,
Fair.
I am in the position that I'm in because I started it. So no one has,
Fair. I know the feeling. One of the things that I want to just kind of toss out to the audience here as well is just kind of an understanding that we all work together. So I've had the pleasure of working with these different groups on their websites, and Lance has had the privilege of working with them from a payment portal perspective. And over the last couple of months, we've been talking about how to bring those things together from an analytical standpoint, how to apply other e-commerce strategies and things to this process. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is what we have already done, but I definitely want to spend a little bit of time talking about where we see the future, because I think the future of this industry and online payments is going to be incredibly critical, especially with some of the data that I'm going to share with you guys today. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Adam Parks. In addition to hosting on Receivables Info, I own Branding Arc, which is the largest marketing firm in the world for receivables management. We operate in 9 countries, specifically just in the receivables management industry. So I'm not going to like leave this webinar and go meet with some local restaurants and figure out how to sell their products. We do receivables all day, every day, and it's become quite a passion for us. And I see that world of, or that intersection between debt collection and e-commerce becoming exponentially more important as we continue forward over the next couple of years. So I wanted to kind of start this off by talking about, really the communication objectives, because when you're talking to a consumer, right? Like law firms aren't generally making a whole lot of outbound phone calls. I know some law firms are and some are not. That kind of comes down to the specificity of the firm. But what are some of the objectives that we're looking at discussing when we talk about communications and communication styles? So I thought it would be interesting, and Brad and Jeff, I'm going to kind of toss this one up to you guys in terms of what
Sure.
some of your objectives are when you're
Sure.
communicating to consumers.
Sure. If you want me to start off, I mean, a big turning
Sure.
point for us was the pandemic.
Mhm.
The idea of like, how do we facilitate payments, that type of thing. So
Mhm.
for us, it really turned to figuring out like any touch point we had with consumers, getting them to, let them know that it was going to be an easy, safe, convenient way, et cetera, to start making payments online for us. So, it, and that was it. Like, I had some numbers run, and it looks like we went back from 2019 compared to 2023. Online payments are up 60% for our firm.
Mhm.
And so that was a big push and the catalyst for us from going from we had the offering, but really we're not making a priority to,
Mhm.
know, something we really tried to push out to consumers.
Well, that differentiation, right, between the having the tool for them to make the payment versus communicating it to them,
Right.
right, and making sure that that is, tying everything together.
Right. Right.
That's
And so
interesting.
yeah. So again, every touch point. So letters, phone calls, in court, pushing the use is something we did.
Interesting. Okay, Brad, how about from your perspective? What was kind of the goal in updating your communications?
Yeah, and I think obviously the goal with any communication, we want to be clear, we want to be concise, we want to make sure we're getting that information that we want to present across in the most efficient and meaningful way that we can, so that it can be easily understood and digested by the consumer, so that
Mhm.
they can process it and then reach back out to us, so we can get something resolved or something worked out. We were sending lots of letters, but that just really doesn't work anymore. I mean, especially like Jeff said, even after the pandemic, with the way the postal service has been, those things just somehow never reach their destination, or it takes 2 to 3 weeks for it to get somewhere now just across the state, and then 2 to 3 weeks from them to mail it back. And that's just it's not the speed of business anymore. It's not the speed anyone's working. No one's looking for those kind of delays, and they want stuff resolved here and now. So we're constantly looking for new modes of communication to meet people where they are, so that we can interact with them in the space that they're already at and at the speed that they're used to interacting, so that we can move our cases along.
Fair. I mean, I feel like the goal of a collections firm is always the underlying goal is to collect money, but I think providing those communication methodologies and finding new and interesting ways to meet the consumer where they are, right? I feel like from a collection law firm perspective, it's a little bit different than a large call center collection agency, right? Who's going to make massive investments into, um, you know, different pieces of technology or whatever. And I feel like the law firms are finding their way now through these online communication channels, because it's not necessarily just about reducing costs, right, in terms of managing incoming calls, because you're doing a lot of things through a legal channel. But the reality is that the younger consumer doesn't check the mail. I mean, Lance, I don't know about you, man, but I can't even. I'm not out to the mailbox but once a week. if that.
And my wife checks the mail. I don't check the mail.
Yeah, I kind of live in the same world, but it's the younger consumer is not really looking to have that interaction. I think they're looking for an online or a phone interaction. I think when it comes to debt collection, it's been my experience that consumers may not want to have a direct discussion anyway, because it may be a little bit more embarrassing than interacting with their online platform. And I think another major factor there comes down to how was the debt originated, right? I mean, guys, tell me, like, what do you think the probability of the consumer wanting to pay online if they took the loan out online and they've never met anybody?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, yes, absolutely.
Took it
It's
out
what the
online.
young,
They've been paying online the entire time as well. Yeah, they've never
right.
interacted with a physical. I mean, how many of these lenders even have a physical presence? How many banks are brick and mortar nowadays? You
Mhm.
go to so many of these banks, it's all online based to begin with. They've never interacted with anyone in a physical sense.
Yeah, so all of a sudden being asked to call somebody and have a discussion, or they're getting these phone calls. I mean, I
Yeah,
just don't see that as a primary communication method
right.
anymore. And I mean, agency and firms are definitely seeing a rise in terms of the online payments. And I think that there's a couple of different factors that lead to consumers wanting to make more payments through the websites. And part of that is similarly, Jeff, to what you were talking about, making sure that people are aware of it. It's making sure that the websites, like the publicly facing information on the websites, is pointing to clearly the payment portal that Lance is managing, right? Because if we're
Right.
not, like, there's this dividing line between the two worlds. Is your publicly facing website, and then you have this other side of the world, which is your payment portal, and they are generally, or should be, separate and apart, right? Like they live in two different worlds. They both need to be secured, they both need to be managed, but they are two different worlds because you're mitigating your risk by segregating that data set, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But one of the things I really want to make sure that we cover is the rise of mobile traffic. Because Jeff, you had talked about, a massive rise in the volume of payments that you're collecting through your website, right? And if the
Correct.
volume of payments is going up, I know, Lance, you mentioned it in your intro about the rise in, or the change in mobile traffic from your perspective. We manage over 120 websites in the collection space. That includes debt buyers, law firms, agencies, and creditors. So I've got, I would say, a deeper visibility into, let's say, the aggregate flow of website traffic across this industry. And it's been my experience that it was small incremental rises at first. So going back to, originally we would code a website to where we would almost build 3 websites, and then you would write a string of code that said either show this one, or this one, desktop, tablet, mobile, right? And then we went into kind of that next generation, which was we're just going to have 2 sites. We're going to have a desktop and a mobile, and we're going to manage them completely separately. And then we hit the world of responsive design, right? And so now when we're building a website, we're actually changing, like, the whole website layout is automatically modified through the cascading style sheets, or the underlying code that's telling it how to look. That is a very different approach, right? And so, Lance, I'm sure that you've been through a few different iterations, and I want to talk about that. It's been my experience that we saw this, like, incremental growth of, let's call it 10% on an annual basis. It was 10% growing each year, roughly. Then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it jumped to like 80%. And I can tell you now that in watching all of this traffic, I'm literally looking at somewhere, a lot of agencies and law firms falling into roughly that 80% of mobile traffic, because a consumer gets a letter, and what's the first thing they do? Google
Look you up, of
search,
course. Yeah.
right? They're not even going to type in your domain, right? They're not even going to type in markofflaw.com, right? They're going to search Markov Law, because the functionality in their mind between the search functionality and the URL functionality is not always clearly understood. So they're just going to hit Google, type it in, your search results are going to pop up, then they're going to go into the website. But what they see on that search result and what they see on that website is your first impression of your business, right? Because we're all sending the same model notice. So it's
Which
always
brings up,
we're pretty damn close to the same letters, right? So has anyone had a different experience? Or are you guys kind of seeing the same thing in terms of that growth? And now we're almost on I'm going to say it's always majority mobile.
yeah, I mean, we we actually built our application mobile friendly from the beginning. And we made that choice. I mean, it was pragmatic in the sense that, you know, we can just build the web application and then just making with the, you know, we use Bootstrap, so it's actually already, it's a CSS framework,
Mhm.
kind of technical, but
Understood.
it allows you to do that kind of design really easily,
Mhm.
depending on the device. And we've kept that same framework for this, you know, all these years, and made sure that we would test both versions. And, you know, so it was just nice that, you know, we didn't really have to plan for that because we already were, it was sort of intrinsic in the way we were developing everything anyway. And at the time, we didn't think that mobile was going to be that big of, you know, that many users were going to be using it. But over time, we noticed that that was predominantly I mean, a good split, maybe half and half for a lot of them, but a lot of times more mobile.
Mhm.
And so we've definitely noticed that mobile is huge. Now, I I don't know if this is necessarily something relevant to this conversation, but we also made this decision so far pragmatically not to build a mobile native app,
Mhm.
because a big reason is because consumers don't want to install a new app and don't have the password, whatever it is. Yes, they would rather just visit the site and go to the payment portal and log in through there instead of some native experience. So we have avoided that, you know, for now. We'll see if that changes,
I
but
think that's a
that's,
great strategic decision, honestly.
yeah.
And this is a conversation I've had on stage many times through the years as we talk about web development and mobile development. Is I agree with you. I don't think that any consumers want to have a debt collection website app on their phone. And to be perfectly frank, the apps aren't providing anything they're not providing a better experience. They're not providing anything new, exciting, or different than I can provide through a web application experience. And I don't have to deal with Google and Apple. And let's not pretend for a minute, even looking at the in app purchases and some of the things that are happening with Apple right now, I can't
Yep.
imagine anybody on this call allowing Apple to take a 30% cut of every dollar that they collect.
Yes.
Yeah, see, Brad, I can see that face, man. Right? Like, but that's the kind of thing that's
Gotcha.
happening right now. Even from a LinkedIn and Facebook are fighting with Apple over whether or not boosted advertisements, right, or boosted posts through whatever social media platform should be charged as an in-app purchase. I don't think that it should, but as an Apple shareholder, I'm kind of torn.
And there's weird, I the App Store, Apple side of things is a little bit more crazy than the Android side as far as what sort of rules they put on your app in order
Mm.
to make sure that it will be accepted in the App Store. And so you have to do a lot of roundabout things to get around those rules. Like, for example, the homepage must do something functional.
Mhm.
Uh, which, like, doesn't a login page do that? But yeah.
I get where you're going with that. It does create some additional complications from a technology perspective. Have you guys seen anything different in terms of the times of day in which you're receiving payments? Or are you looking at it from a time of day perspective?
I think we definitely have, through the mobile and through the IVR online phone system that we use as well for people that they can make automated payments through the website. You know,
Mhm.
we've got people here answering the phone to take those payments Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But I did not realize how many people are trying to make payments at 2 in the morning or on a Sunday afternoon. You know, I mean, I get it. It's when people have the time. They've got their
Yeah.
life, they've got their day-to-day activities, they've got kids and work and everything else too. I'm kind of at the bottom of the list. And once they get around to it, it's when they get around to it. And to be able to have that availability for them to get to you, you're going to be on the list. If you get stuck till tomorrow when you're open at 9 a.m., you're going to get forgotten and the payment's not going to get made. So you've got to have that availability to meet the person when they're there and ready and able to do it so you can take that transaction.
Yeah, and I can echo that. You know, there's a lot of weekend payment.
Yeah,
I would think so.
we get payments 24/7. So
Yeah,
it's, yeah.
Honestly, I'm not surprised because that's when I'm generally doing that kind of work, right? Like 9 to 5 is when I can have when I can communicate with other businesses, right? Like that's when I can sell and interact. And so that administrative type work tends to get pushed towards the end of the day, whether you're collecting commercial or, doing it like a consumer. Now, Brad, you had mentioned a couple of the communication channels that you're using in terms of the IVR and the chat portals. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how that's branched out for you, like how you guys have looked at that as a law firm?
Yeah, we've just, like I said, looked at it as another way to reach out to people. It's also a way to kind of free up the people that we do have here taking phone calls so that they can be used to deal with more problems, answer more questions, not just do those mundane, routine things where they're just taking a payment, they're just taking down bank information. Getting it through those portals and that IVR not only frees our people up to answer those hard questions that you need a person to do and to have that interaction. But it also keeps that information a little more secure, a little more private, because you're going through the online secure system instead of an individual.
Mhm.
So it just frees up a lot of methods, having it available, whether it's the website or through the phone system. People prefer either one, kind of just depends on the individual person, but making sure we have all those channels available is definitely created an increase in traffic and freed our people up to do some other things as well.
So in leveraging the technology, have you been able to increase the volume that you can appropriately manage? Right. So it's not necessarily just about reducing costs, it's about increasing capacity.
Exactly, 100%. You hear that all the time in management stuff. They talk about having the right people in the right seats, but it's also about giving them the right tools to do their
Sure.
work. The technology is really important. You can have the right person doing the right thing, but if you don't give them the right tools to accomplish that job, they can't be as productive as they otherwise could be, and you're not getting the most value and the most efficiencies out of them.
Mhm.
I grew up, my dad was in construction, so just thinking about it that way, you think about, you give a guy a hammer, yeah, he can build a house, but you give him a nail gun, imagine what he can do.
Yeah,
So yeah,
sure.
we've got people taking these payments. You give them a telephone, they can do one thing, but you give them a website, you give them the automated systems. There's so much more that they can accomplish and just that much more efficient.
It just puts them into a whole new level, right? It does enable those individuals to be the best that they can. Jeff, how about from your
Yeah.
perspective? Have you started deploying multiple communication channels?
So IVR, absolutely very positive. We have not embraced the chat. I'm sure it's a coming next thing. But no, again, it's all of that stuff. It's a better use of time. I think, God, I was told 2022 to 2023, our payments went up 22%. Online payments went up 22%. And again, it's an efficiency, but also in a compliance standpoint, it's less
Mhm.
risk.
Sure.
There's some risk to human communication, and again, that's they can come in, get their business done, as opposed to a conversation somehow for some reason going off the rails.
I think it's a great point that is really important to emphasize is that reduction in risk and compliance, right? If every time we can take the human element out of it and create a systematic approach, the better off we are, right? The computer always follows the policies and procedures, like each and every time without fail. All
I don't
right,
know
let's hear
about.
it, Lance. Come on.
Well, with the advent of ChatGPT.
All right. Well, if you're willing to install that type of technology at this point and you're running it off of publicly available information, I mean, you got bigger problems to concern yourself with. So I think getting down the generative AI path is a little bit different than I think where the law firms are at these days. But we can go the super nerd route. I think we got a slide at the end where we get to start talking about our visions for the future and the next communication methodology that will come out, because I think it's important that we identify that that IVR or the phone portion of this was regulated in what, 1976. The next version of regulation that we saw related to these communication channels was like 2 years ago. So I'm wondering, as communication channels continue to change into the future and as we find new ways to communicate back and forth, how slow is the regulatory bodies going to be in providing some level of guidance as to how we can or cannot communicate using those channels? I hope it moves faster than Reg F.
Yeah. I think that we obviously are governed by some arcane laws, but like at least the spirit of those laws, I think, should be held to account, where the language that you and process that you guide consumers through is one which complies with existing laws and is and makes sense. And I think if you can you know uh, if you run your processes in the spirit of Reg F and Reg E and
Mhm.
FDCPA, you should we should be fine. It's not that much different, really, this technology. You have
Well, my question is about the next layer, right? So whether it's haptics to your wrist or whatever that next communication methodology is, but we're gonna circle
yeah.
back to that. That's our kind of towards the end here. We'll jump back into it. But this was something that Lance and I have talked about a lot through the years, and his partner Eric as well, is that difference between the websites and the portals, because they are truly different. And not only different from a what's your objective, but these are different from a technology perspective, from a security perspective, from a focal point perspective, because that front facing website, that information that can be accessed without authenticating the user, right? To me, that's that dividing point, is when we need to authenticate the user. So if you look at one of the law firm websites, and I would look at Slovin and Associates, I would look at Markov Law as examples here. But the forward facing portion of that website, like what you see prior to authenticating, falls on WordPress, right? That's standard website application stack technology, where the other side is going to fall into where you're keeping your payments, the user's been authenticated, the handshakes back and forth to your system of record. All of those things end up on the portal side. So Lance, I know we've talked about this a lot. I want to hear your point of view about kind of that separation and how these two worlds live together symbiotically.
Yeah, you definitely have to keep them separate. The public facing side of things is more, to me, like a marketing vehicle for the other side of things, and it's completely public. It's not secure in the sense that for consumers.
Mhm.
For example, if you have a payment form that is completely open, I don't recommend this. Can be susceptible to fraud. There are bots out there that search the internet for payment forms everywhere, and they try to tamper with them. So all of our forms are actually, you have to either pass a CAPTCHA if you do have guest login, but I prefer requiring the consumer to log in and register in some form, because and then that actually shows the intent that they plan on trying to make a payment. But like you said, all of the hooks for communicating with the back end data system, those are all hidden behind authenticated means, and you can't
Mhm.
really, as a consumer, as a user, you shouldn't be able to touch those. The
Mhm.
marketing side, completely separate, public. Shouldn't worry as much about security, except for administrating the pages.
Mhm.
But your worry is more about the like you said, the Google and your reputation.
Agreed. I would say the only thing that I've seen a couple of times recently is I have seen websites get pulled into PCI audits as under the guise of they link to where the payment is made. So I do think that the publicly facing side of the website, so the let's call it the website side versus the portal side, I think the website side really does need to have as much security as you can. You need to keep it secure. You need to manage it correctly. However, however, to reinforce your point, never put consumer information on that side. It's not built for it. WordPress is an open source platform. As an open source platform, that means that people all day, every day, are trying to poke holes in it, right? And eventually occasionally they poke a hole. Our job is to know that fast, react quickly, respond with a patch, right? So our job is to manage that process. But it is important that we manage it with security, but we always need to know that it is an open source platform. Now, the portals, on the other hand, are never open source. You may be using a bootstrap or something for an interface perspective, but I know that your underlying core technology is wrapped up differently, so to speak. Right? You're just going to use something totally different.
I do want to make a distinction.
Sure.
Yes, you do need to have security on the WordPress side. Obviously, you need an SSL certificate. You need to make sure you're not installing plugins that you aren't vetted. But the biggest, there's in PCI terms, there is this concept called scope,
Mhm.
and you should avoid doing anything that relates to card handling on your publicly facing website,
Yes.
and just linking to our portal should alleviate scope in that, in my opinion. And that's how our
Agreed.
piece. So if you link to our site and you don't have any form of any sort, and you just say go here to this pay form, you should be fine as far as PCI compliance goes, because we are handling that.
I've only had a couple of auditors come back and try and claim it, and when I've brought it up to like SOC 2 type 2 auditors, they go, "What? That shouldn't
Yeah.
fall into PCI scope. Like, what are you talking about?"
It only falls into the scope if there is a payment form on your web page.
Embedded.
It's taking in credit card information.
Correct. That I agree with that statement. However, I do want to warn the audience that that may not always be their experience, depending on which auditors they're
Yes.
using.
Yes.
And if you do have an auditor that comes back, you may need to look at someone who better understands the rule set for PCI. That would be my advice to the audience.
Gotcha.
Couple other things that are a little bit different between these two worlds, though, is the SEO versus the hidden content. And so I know Lance touched on this briefly, but on the website side, the website should have is publicly facing, which means Google can read it. The portal is non-public facing, requires authentication. Google can't see it. So anything that we put on that side outside of any content that's added to the login page, for example, that is public facing, is not going to be part of your SEO efforts. It should be part of your core business functionality and your core business efforts to drive consumers towards that portal. That's where you're going to achieve your business objective of collecting money. But there is a little bit of a difference there in terms of what Google can see. Google can only see what's publicly facing. And we talk a little bit about the reputation management. From a reputation standpoint, the website side is going to be where you're doing a lot of that work. However, it has been my experience that when working with your portal correctly, and when your web team and your portal team are communicating, there are some things that you can do to actually get the payment portal to rank directly as well. And for me, I find that to be a great solution, meaning that the first returned result from Google is the company website, the law firm website, right? markofflaw.com. And the second result should be the payment portal itself, because it is living on a separate domain or subdomain. So there are some things that you can do to kind of push on that. It doesn't always work immediately. Google is constantly changing the algorithm, and it does make it a little bit more complex to chase. But just something that's worth mentioning, considering our underlying topic today.
Good info. Thank you.
So I know you guys don't really have to worry about this. We'll just kind of take care of that for you. But I think it's important.
I prefer it that way for sure.
That flow. So
just show me the payments, please.
Just show, look, but isn't that the underlying business objective, right? We're ultimately here to collect money. But from Markoff, from your perspectives, Jeff, like you guys pre-pandemic, you guys had some resistance to going online and pushing for it. Can we talk a little bit about I know COVID was kind of the catalyst for you, but what were some of those trepidations that others may be facing now?
Just there were some compliance concerns, which, we got outside help on that aspect of it. But there is a cost associated with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was certainly a hesitancy to open up the floodgates there, not knowing, what efficiencies would be and what benefits would be, fear of the unknown. I guess that's really it. It's just fear of the unknown, but we felt we were in a position where we just had to make that push forward, just to make the best of a not a great situation in the collection world at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And we really haven't looked back, and we're trying to, get better and better with it every month.
Sounds like a lot of people are facing that similar kind of challenge set, right? It's that fear of the unknown is a very real thing. It's hard for an organization to predict what the effect of instituting new technology will be when you're dealing with consumers, right? Like, because you don't know 100% what's going to happen next. It does take a little bit of a leap of faith. But it feels like there's been quite a few trailblazers, including yourself, that have kind of laid a guideline for how to actually get this done. Now, Brad, from your perspective, I know IVR was not where you wanted. You guys started online, and IVR wasn't a focal point. How has that evolution kind of been for your firm?
Yeah, and we started that way. We wanted to have the website available for those people who wanted to have that online experience. We knew there were people coming to our website to figure out who we were and what was going on, and looking for ways to communicate. And if they could just quickly click and make a payment, that was going to be good.
Mhm.
But we liked having our people here on the phone, people that they could provide that personal touch. They could make sure that people were getting all the information they need, that they were comfortable with what was going on, and that it was a nice, easy transaction for them. So we had that hands-on experience. And honestly, it just grew and grew and got to be too much. So you try and find a partner out there that can help you with those efficiencies. Again, like Jeff was saying, compliance is usually the huge
Mhm.
just scary thing for everyone out there, and you want to make sure that you find the right partner who has that in mind as well, and that they've got that focus. And once you're comfortable with them, um, stuff just kind of ran from there. And we were astonished at how quickly payments picked up on there, and how fast it just turned up for us. It was a lot more than we expected.
That's interesting. And I'm not surprised that things moved pretty quickly, right? There's so many consumers that want to have that interaction. So by providing it in whatever way we can, I think helps us to add some new value. As you've gone through kind of the process of ramping up your team, have you seen any effects on your like team itself? Is it more or less stressful for them? Like, is there anything that you're seeing that's actually changing within the people side of things?
I don't know if it's any less stressful for them, honestly, because some of those
Higher
just
volumes.
nice, easy, quick payments were easy calls for them. They got a nice, easy little break from somebody who was, honestly a little upset that they had been sued. You get that. It's personal, and they're a little frustrated, so they start the calls that way. And we've got great people who are able to handle those cool and calm, and can let someone know exactly what's going on and what their options are.
Mhm.
Uh, so they get more of those now, because the nice, easy payment ones just run through. They just run through the automated system, and so my people are only getting the ones who really want to get out there in front of it. But I was shocked with the IVR too, though, just how many people were making payments on the phone. I assumed
Mhm.
that was kind of an older generation thing, and people, the young people are going to the website. They don't care about the phone. They're not dialing those numbers, but it's really not that way. It's been a huge uptick all around through the phone. I didn't realize that many people would want to actually dial in a payment.
Yeah.
That
Can add
actually
on
is a little
there.
bit
Oh, sorry.
surprising. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, adding on there that that we've got the IVR that also handles Spanish calls, which
Mm.
can be helpful. Can be very helpful.
We may have to look into that option, Lance. I didn't know. Something I don't think we're
Yeah.
currently doing.
Yep. Definitely. Let us
Time to
know. We'll,
apply the
we'll
new
talk.
language pack.
Yeah.
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 But I think you bring up a really great point there, right? We're dealing with a global economy at this point, and all around the United States, you're dealing with different languages and different pockets. I mean, I'm literally sitting over here learning Portuguese right now, right? Which is only spoken in 2 countries, but I could not believe how big the Portuguese community is throughout Florida and around the United, or Brazilian community throughout Florida and around the United States. So it's been interesting to see how language can affect that. But I think leveraging this technology, whether it be online or through the IVR, that capability of multi-language is essential these days, especially depending on what kinds of products you're either buying or servicing.
Right.
Yeah, on the portal we have that too. So
Yeah, I figured on the portal side that was good to go. That one I think I had have actually seen before. I did not know that you guys were doing it on the IVR. I find that to be very interesting
mhm.
in terms of being able to apply those language differences, because even contextually, like language is just very different between different languages.
Well, it's funny because I think that really early on we had some Florida firms, and so
Mhm. Oh, fair. So having Spanish speaking was absolutely
yes,
necessary for them to operate anywhere in South Florida.
yes.
Yeah, that's fair. As a South Florida resident, I can confirm the accuracy of those statements. That's interesting. The language piece, I think, is really interesting, and I think it is going to be a big part of where the industry goes over the next 10 years. But as we talk about driving traffic to your website channel, so you guys both have websites, you both have payment portals, and you're trying to get people from I found you, I now know who the law firm is, to I paid you, right? In the fewest amount of clicks, nonetheless. It's a bold objective, but what are some of the things that we can be doing to drive more of these consumers directly to the payment portal, get them authenticated and move them forward? I'll take the first one here because this is the world that I live in, but it's the web design and visible buttons and workflows. It's just making it stand out on the website. You can't make the payment button the same color as everything else. You got to really just try and find ways to draw attention and draw the eye to it. Um, I think if you're tracking your website, there's a lot of different tools that you can use. You can use Google Analytics for free. There's all kinds of heat map tools and scroll map tools that help you better understand how the users are actually dragging their mouse around the screen and where their eyes are going. Some of that is, generated based on where are they moving their mouse, where are they clicking, and are they always going to the payment button in the top right-hand corner? Yeah, it's in the top right-hand corner for a reason, because that's where the consumer is looking for it. So there are some methodologies to the madness in terms of how websites are designed. And that's probably why so many websites across the space have similar design patterns. Because if we're all looking at the analytics, we're all seeing the same things, because the consumer interactions don't change between your two law firms. You may not be dealing with the exact same consumer, but all the consumers are generally behaving in pretty much the same way, which gives you the capability of learning from each other and the ability of furthering your kind of discussion there. What else are you guys doing to drive those consumers towards the website channel?
I don't know, I
Other
can
than
say that,
watching?
it's in the communication, typically by phone.
Mhm.
And you have a successful phone call, you just make a priority and a point of saying that in the future, this is easier for everybody if you log on and, make this payment online. It's probably
So
the
I
biggest.
mean,
It's
it sounds
pretty
like people
simple,
are
but
using
it's,
different.
the,
Yeah, it does
but
sound
it's,
simple, right? But it's on like the written communications or outbounding emails. Like, are you just kind of putting it everywhere?
Yeah, it's on everything. It's on the letters, it's on the court filings, it's on the emails, it's on everything.
It's on the court filings. That's interesting. So
Yeah.
no matter what document the consumer touches, they should be able to find their way back to you.
Yep. Find the phone number. You can find the website. You can find it on anything if it came from us, it's gone there.
Very interesting. And then Lance, from your perspective, I know we've talked a little bit about e-commerce and the application of e-commerce here. What are some of the things that you're doing today to try and get those consumers to the portal or back to the portal?
Yeah, it's definitely a marketing strategy you have to implement. You know, the biggest things have been just marketing it, and like Markov and Slovin have done already. Uh, you know, getting your consumers to be familiar with it, telling them about it, and saying, "Hey, there's a website. Go to that for the future," or having it in your voicemail. So
Mhm.
like when they first call up, like, "Oh, did you
Mm.
know that instead of talking to one of our agents, you can go to the website," that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and then additionally, with the mail, we are rolling out a feature like in a couple of weeks, that we're excited about, for portal invites. So
Ah.
you can create like a whole campaign. Imagine we have this new tool that's basically allows you to manage your communications with consumers.
Mhm.
And so one of the first features that you can use is that you can send a bunch of portal invites to consumers, and then see how that performs over time. So, whether or not they visited the QR code, whether or not they logged in, whether or not they made a payment. It's all going to be tracked, from step one to the end. So we're really excited about that. And I think that's really going to be the future right now, is this sort of communication management system. We also have like, in addition to a batch invite, there's also a one at a time. So if you have an agent that you can have logged in, you can actually have them start, if they're on the phone, send them a link to be invited to the portal if they have their email address,
Mm.
and then they can. It's just a
That
little easier.
that's a really interesting methodology, right? If I've got them on the phone, can I hit them with a link? To me,
Yeah.
and this is just because I fly American, but that's exactly what happens with American Airlines.
Yep.
Right. I don't want to get too specific. But every time I call into them, what's the first thing the IVR says? Hey, did you know that you can book flights online? Like, you don't really need this. Do you want me to text a link to your phone number right now? Because like you just called me from a phone number, like I could text it to you. I
Yep.
mean, I feel like that goes off every 3 or 4 minutes. Now, if it would be great if that was, actually worked with the airline, but it sounds like it's something that you guys have figured out on your side of the world.
And the nice thing is you get to skip the one of the steps in the beginning of the consumer process is they have to verify who they are. They have to
Mhm.
put in their file number and their last four of their SOCH and stuff like that. They still have to put the last four of their SOCH in, but at least the file number, since you were on the phone with the consumer and you figured out what their file number was, you can inject that into the link. And so when they click on it, they skip that step.
Oh, that's nice. So that which you have verified through the discussion, you can now kick over to them so that you're shortening the amount of clicks from I
Yes.
found you to I paid you.
Exactly.
I feel like that's been my mantra for many years now.
I like it. I like it.
Look, every time that I sit down to design a website, that's the mantra that I recite to our web development team and our designers, right? Like, how am I going to get from point A to point B in the least amount of clicks?
I want to borrow that.
Feel free. Feel free. Like, we're all working together to try and solve problems and take
Yes.
these, specifically these guys and many others, to the next level. So I think this is
Yes.
a great conversation. Now, QR codes is something that was kind of a hot button a few years ago. Feels like it shows up every few years and then it fades away again. Is anybody or any of you using QR codes at this point, on the letters or in other ways to drive consumers?
We are not.
Nope, not at
It
all.
does
I
not
will
feel like
s-
a law firm kind of thing.
I will say that the portal invite feature that we've developed has that ability to do that if you would like. You just need to
Okay.
sync. We generate the QR codes and the links, and
Mhm.
the QR codes actually have the file number embedded into them already.
Okay.
So again, the skipping process is still there. So if you work with your letter vendor, you can export it. And if
Very
you guys
interesting.
don't want to work with a letter vendor, we also have a vendor we can use, but they're a little more expensive than some of the other letter vendors that are in the collection space. So either or, we're comfortable with.
Industry specific. Totally understood.
Yes.
Um, wow, it sounds like you guys are working on some really interesting things to alleviate the friction points between the law firm and the consumer, which I find that to be incredibly interesting. So, kind of moving into our final 10 minutes here, and one of my favorite things here is like, what's next, guys? How are we like? I realize that this goes a little bit beyond our scope today, but I think it's always interesting. As from a consumer standpoint, we were all big on the phone, right? The consumers were all about the phone. About 2009, I'm going to draw a line specifically and say 2009 was the year that the iPhone launched. Was the year that text messaging became more powerful in the hands of the consumer, because BlackBerry was doing it, and I don't know about you guys, but I never could send a text through a button phone. So what comes next with all of this new technology that's coming out around the space? Like, do we see anything else starting to come up in terms of ways of communicating?
I'll go last because I have way too much to say about
I know
this.
you're going to
So
start talking about oh my God,
Yeah.
Zuckerberg and the neural links. I saw that video yesterday. Um,
Oh boy.
yeah,
Mm.
I don't know how we're going to regulate that, honestly. I'm not even sure that it's going to take some time for the consumers to even understand it. But any thoughts on what the future looks
Well,
like of communications?
I don't know. I mean, as the oldest person on the phone here, or I mean, on the call, it's not out. We're going to embrace, as an industry, we're going to embrace text a lot more. I mean, it's already there, but I think as law firms, there's been some hesitation to get all in on text communication, and I'm sure that's going to happen in the very near future.
I think you're right. I think the comfort level with text has been improving. Look at solutions by text, and they're just like explosion. and how people were functioning through that technology. I do think that some of these SMS versus MMS, and I do think that from a technology perspective, there are some new opportunities that will start to exist within the texting world. I don't know how quickly that'll roll out or become ubiquitous across consumer devices, but I think that that is one of the areas in which I've seen significant improvements or attempts to improve based on the capabilities of the delivery networks. Does that make sense?
I think that at the moment today, and
Yeah.
this may improve in the future, but text is not secure enough for payment processing.
Mhm.
So if you're not doing payment processing, chat is fine. But I think if you are doing payment processing, you have to avoid it like all costs. If you're doing a verification of the consumer, you probably shouldn't do that either. So anything involving Pi, I wouldn't do via text. And then if that's, it's kind of similar to email, I wouldn't do
Mhm.
that via email either. So if I would treat email and text as more at today, at least, as a communication vehicle for driving people to your website, whatever, IVR, you know. So
I think that's an interesting approach. I don't disagree with what you're saying. Text messaging is only secure if you're running iPhone to iPhone or WhatsApp to WhatsApp and you've encrypted your channel. Other than that, I mean, I think a lot
and
of
you
people.
still run the problem of you have the message history on your phone too. So if for whatever reason someone got access to your phone, and
Physical
then
devices.
yeah,
Yeah. 100%. I definitely, I don't disagree with your statement. I think that there's significant limitations to those communication channels, and email to me has always been a little bit more difficult. I think the email channel is going to see significant challenges over the coming years. I don't know about y'all, but the volume of spam has got me twisted lately, and now I'm sitting here literally working through my anti-spam messaging. But I do the same thing from a phone perspective, right? If you call my cell phone and I don't have your number saved, you're going through a spam filter, and it's going to require like a
yeah.
reCAPTCHA, specific actions to get through to me.
And text is going to get worse actually. I see an uptick in spam on text, and the the cell phone providers are creating better junk filters. So as
Yeah,
a
and if you
result,
haven't tried it yet, RoboKiller won the FTC spam blocking competition. I want to say it's about $30 a year and the best money I've ever spent. I'm blocking somewhere between, I don't know, let's call it 5 to 50 calls a day right now.
wow.
So what happens when you're a marketing dude and your phone number ends up everywhere. But beyond that, and Brad, maybe a question for you is, do you think crypto is going to become a thing in our space? Do you think, like, from an online payment perspective, we'll start moving in that direction?
I don't know if it'll get there with crypto, but some of these other, just payment vehicles, it may not be a bad idea, with PayPal, Venmo, all these different kind of applications, I'm paying my friends for Venmo for dinner, we're chipping in here and there, and there's the money is in there. The people are in those apps anyway, sending money left and right. So if you've got the ability to accept it, it's just another place where you can meet them where they already are. They're already in their phone. They're already typing that stuff in. To be able to quickly take a payment that way as well is something that I think people are definitely going to do. I mean, just the ones my kids use for all kinds of stuff is things people have never even heard of. So there's so many ways now to send money. You can even send money, I found out, through Facebook Messenger. Not that people use that for anything, but you can pass money back and forth through so many different vehicles. So being able to receive it is a good thing.
Maybe that's why the IRS had to delay their ruling for the transactions over 600. There's too many channels for them to manage. Maybe that's why they need 80,000 more agents.
I I think I think that those mediums will increase in adoption. We have to be a little careful right now because it's not necessarily clear what the fees are like for the merchant. Today we've already got two options, card and ACH, and obviously firms love ACH because it's so much cheaper than card. And there are firms that want to push the fee that you're using for card onto the consumer, which that's a very precarious thing already. But yeah, we have to be a little careful from that perspective. Also, we have to be a little bit careful with the way that those apps allow for canceling the payment, and making sure
Reversing
that
a payment, unlike a
yes,
wire. Yeah. Oh,
yes.
100%.
So
We're also I want to say we're one of the only countries in the world that does not have a standardized app for payments. So like when I'm in India, for example, I use the same app everywhere, whether I'm paying somebody, whether I'm paying for a shoe shine or I'm buying, food or whatever, almost every payment's going through the same app. I could say the same thing for Brazil. And maybe that's because those are BRICS countries, but I've seen it in Europe. I've seen it in other places. There's definitely this ubiquity to different countries holding those types of tools, especially as you start to look in Africa. And I think looking at Africa and the way in which that technology is evolving so rapidly is going to eventually reflect in the United States, because the regulatory environments that we face here force technology to move significantly slower than the technology can actually move. And then
Yep.
when you're dealing in countries with hyper inflation, right? Kenya and others, it's really putting an interesting burden on the population to find alternatives, right? If you can't use your home currency, you need to trade in a crypto, you need to trade in US dollars or whatever. And then the applications that enable that transaction happen by touching phones or whatever the case may be, I think is where the future of these payment communications are ultimately going to be in the short term. In the long term, who knows, right? I think there's a lot of currency ambiguity right now from a global perspective. There's a lot of countries bringing their currencies back, the de-dollarization. I think there's a lot of different things that will happen over time, but the payments themselves and the methodologies in which we use them, I think exactly what you're talking about with the Venmos and the PayPals of the world is where a lot of that future is going to lie. Even Zelle being baked into most bank accounts now for Bank of America, I think Chase and a whole handful of others, building out those networks. But I do think it's going to take some time before we see any level of standardization to it.
And we just have to be careful with the chargeback situation, because even with Zelle, that's been a big issue. So
1,000. Look, it's the number one scam. If you get a random, if you get a random payment from someone you don't know, don't return it. Don't do anything. Don't interact. But clearly, Lance, we need to have a drink and chat some more. We could go deep down the nerd rabbit hole together.
Yep.
But for today, gentlemen, we are kind of hitting the end. Any final words for our audience today? Feel like we covered a lot of content today, gentlemen. So I want to thank everybody for your time and attention watching us today. I had a lot of fun with these guys. I've been blessed to get to know them throughout the years. I hope you all got to know them a little bit today as well. If you have additional questions that you'd like to ask that you didn't drop into the chat today, we'll be posting this to YouTube for you to share with your colleagues and friends, and we'll be responding on both LinkedIn and YouTube to any additional questions. If you have additional topics you'd like to see us cover, leave those in the comments below as well. And hopefully I'll be lucky enough to be able to get these gentlemen back at least one more time to help me continue to create great content for a great industry. But until next time, gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll see y'all again soon.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all again in the near future.